Hello, everyone. People are starting to funnel in now that we are live with the second session of the day. Really exciting discussion planned for today, and we have some really awesome speakers that I'm here joined with. So, welcome in, everyone. Please get seated virtually. If you are watching from the lobby, please do click the blue join button on today's session. This way you can interact and have full capabilities of the Zoom events platform. And yeah, without further ado, I will kick things off with a few housekeeping notes and introductions. So yeah, today's session is titled, "Are chargebacks still the black sheep of payments, or are they finally evolving?" If you don't know me, my name is John Carlo. I'm on the marketing team at Justt, and I'll be helping with moderating today's session. I'll be more in the background. I'm thrilled to welcome our speakers for today, and we'll be handing the microphone over to them in just a moment. But first, we'll do some introductions. So everyone, please welcome Brian Davis, who is a recognized voice in fraud prevention with more than a decade of experience building and scaling fraud programs. Through his work with the House of Fraud, he advises organizations on how to strengthen their fraud programs. Welcome, Brian. In addition, we have Barbara Redaelli, Fraud and Dispute Strategy Manager at lastminute.com. She brings more than 15 years of experience in risk management, building scalable strategies, optimizing KPIs, and fostering international collaboration to strengthen fraud and dispute programs. Welcome, Barbara. We are also joined by Dave Gestaut, Principal Technical Program Manager at Microsoft. He leads cross-functional initiatives in risk, payments, and commerce, bringing deep expertise in chargebacks, disputes, and fraud prevention. Welcome, Dave. And last but not least, we have Roenen Ben-Ami, a leading voice in the payments and chargeback space and co-founder and chief risk officer at Justt. Prior to founding Justt, he built the chargeback and merchant risk teams at Simplex, recovering millions of dollars annually. Welcome, everyone. And before we jump in, I just have a couple quick housekeeping notes. As I mentioned before, if you would like to participate in the dedicated Q&A session we have planned for the end of today's discussion, please join through the Zoom events lobby, and you'll be able to access the Q&A functionality in the interface. We will be keeping an eye on those, and we will definitely make sure to get to as many as possible during that final segment. And my last note, this session is being recorded, and we will be sharing this session with participants after the virtual event has ended. So without further ado, thank you for hearing my spiel, and I will hand the microphone over to our amazing panelists for today. Thanks for joining us. Roenen, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, JC. And thank you for the panelists for joining us today, and for everybody, all the audience. Thank you for being here with us today. We're following with the second session today. It's been an exciting start to the second day of Chargeback X. And we have a really great panel discussion today, because what I really like about this discussion is each one of us joined the chargeback space at a different time period in the industry, and we've have different experiences because we all come from different companies, different industries, but we're all dealing with chargebacks from a different viewpoint. So we're really going to be talking about each one of our viewpoints, our experience of the development of chargebacks, where it's gone, how it's evolved, and where do we see it going in the future. I could say my personal experience when I joined the world of payments and fraud and chargebacks, I called it the black sheep of credit card processing, because I felt like technology was advancing. And I mentioned this yesterday in some of the sessions. Technology is advancing. There was so much being done. I grew up in the anti-fraud space. So much was being done on that side. But seems like to me, chargebacks were left in the past in a lot of ways. That was my experience. But before I jump in, I know JC got the opportunity to introduce everybody. I'd love each one of you to tell a little bit about yourself and your background, because it'll really tie into the actual discussion. So Dave, I'll start with you. I'd love for you to tell the audience about yourself a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much. So Dave Gestaut, everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm at Microsoft, and I look over chargebacks regardless of the business line of Microsoft. So Xbox, Office 365, Azure, Bing Ads, all of that is in my purview. And it's just a really exciting time, as Ronen has spoke about, with advances in technology and being able to really address things as that technology allows us to. So thank you all for joining.
Amazing. Thank you, Dave. And Barbara, please introduce yourself.
Yes, sure. Nice to meet you. Nice to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara. I'm Frozen Chargeback Strategy Manager at lastminute.com, which is an online travel agency. I'm part of the payment operation team, and my role focuses on fraud and chargebacks, but with a strategic perspective. I mean, not only the day-to-day management, but a long-term view of the evolution of processes and tools. I've been there for almost 15 years in compliance and risk management, but I started managing chargebacks in 2021. So quite recently, I think, compared to your experiences, but here I am.
Amazing.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Barbara. And Brian?
Thanks for having me. I'm excited because chargebacks have always been near and dear to my heart. I started within the fraud space. I didn't know really what that meant or what I was getting myself into. About a decade ago, I didn't know if chargebacks were good or bad. But my start of my career is I build out fraud programs from scratch. So I'm the sucker that comes in from fraud by committee, takes over, builds out the team, the tools, the rules, everything sort of like that to build out a healthy foundation and understand what risks do we really care about. The industries I've typically worked in, chargebacks have always been a pillar of that. So they've never left me.
Amazing. So Brian, I'll start with you. When you joined the industry, what were chargebacks like when you joined? What were the main challenges there? How was it talked about in the industry? And what was your initial perception about the world of chargebacks?
A baptism by confusion. Since I'm a team of one, I kind of come in. My first role, I didn't really have much like career experience of like how to actually build it out. So the first time I was taking over from customer operations teams, that's where I sat in. So they did a decent job looking back at it, but there wasn't really a foundation to train me. It just kind of like, here's what we do. We need to do better, but we don't really know how to do any of that. So about a decade ago, there weren't as many payment processors. There definitely wasn't really any tooling. So it was just kind of like, we got a dispute, copy paste some transactional details, submit it, and wait 45 to 55 days, and we lost again. So it took a little bit of losing to actually have that feedback cycle, but it was very manual from pulling it, from looking at the customer details. I won't really even say putting together compelling evidence at that point in my career. We got a little bit better at that down the line. And then reporting. Reporting was all manual after that, of waiting for the lag, trying to match it up from when transactions hit versus when chargebacks came through. What did we win? What did we recover? What fees? Where do I even find fees in this payment portal? So all of that was just kind of a headache of just kind of asking people internally, what do you care about? But at that point, people didn't really know what to care about for fraud. So it was really hard for me at that stage. A lot of learning, a lot of lessons, but that's the foundation of where I started. Very, very manual.
Thank you, Brian. Super interesting, especially you've been in the industry for so long and seeing what it looked like in that period. Dave, can you tell us about your experience? Was Microsoft your first experience in the world of chargebacks? If so, what was it like when you first joined, the challenges, and what was your perception about it?
Yeah, no, thanks. I was really fortunate. My first role, not my first role in Microsoft, but Microsoft was my first introduction to chargebacks. I was kind of brought in with an objective, a strategic objective to really reduce chargeback footprint at Microsoft. And I was really fortunate that when I had joined, there had already been significant investment in that chargeback management and automation space. So the foundational framework was really there. And just importantly, right, like I had the colleagues that already kind of understood it as well. So when it came to, modernizing the representment templates and getting that feedback loop, I could have, those people in my corner. And then also there's a great merchant community as well to depend on. So got to really do outreach there. And then that being said, right, like looking back at it, like the biggest challenge I would say is that we were kind of more in the reactive state when it came to chargeback management, right? And you have to be proactive in it. And that meant that outreach to, all the various teams within Microsoft and really explaining what chargebacks were and why it's important, not just from a cost reduction measure, but really from a customer satisfaction improvement ability, right? To really get those stakeholders to buy into it. And I think that really helps shift the mindsets and really drive some great change.
Really interesting. And Barbara, how was it for you when you joined? What was your perception? Was last minute your first experience in chargebacks?
Well, at least yes, but indeed, I started working in a financial institution in Italy. They were small issuers. And when I remember asking how they manage chargeback internally, and the answer at the time was that we do not really manage chargeback. Okay, so in a financial institution, no chargeback management at all. And when I came in last minute, I found a completely different world because one of our co-founder had a strong payment culture. So what I found, it was a major payment culture in place in last minute. It seems almost a joke. Financial institution, no chargeback management in last minute, yes, but this is this. And when I took over chargeback management here, there were already automations and structured processes in place. This means that I simply had to announce them. So for me, chargeback hasn't been black sheep. I never managed them via fax machines, okay? But what I felt in the past is that I was really alone. There was nobody to talk with about chargebacks. So what I'm seeing that is changing now is the consciousness and the culture about this topic, which is fundamental within all the payment landscape and the payment flow. We have transaction, we have funds, we have chargebacks, not only transactions.
Great points, and thanks for sharing all that. I loved a lot of what you said. It reminds me of just the last panel I was on, and Chase Payment Tech, Ludovic mentioned, it's kind of like this invisible pain that exists in a way, and it's becoming more into our conscious now that we need to be talking about this more. But because of the fact that it's kind of brushed under the rug a lot of times, and there's a lot of complexities around chargebacks, what I feel is there's a lot of times misunderstandings around chargebacks. Dave, are you seeing any specific types of misunderstandings that are common in the industry, or maybe things that you learned over time or you saw others are struggling with around chargebacks?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. At my time at Microsoft, I think the really biggest misconception that I run into is that all chargebacks are because of fraud, right? And when you kind of treat it as that monolithic issue, you really lose the nuance and ability to learn from key opportunities from the different chargebacks you receive, right? Yes, fraud is the leading cause, but even within fraud, there's third-party fraud, there's first-party fraud that can be broken down into like malicious or opportunistic, or even from customer confusion. And then there's, merchant and service, chargebacks that we get as well. So without understanding those nuances, you really miss the opportunity to grow and learn and address those, right? Like one example that comes to mind at Microsoft is I had to help a business unit really drive down chargebacks, and they're looking at dashboards that are involved, and there was a spike and they got concerned, right? And so they're like, oh gosh, there's a fraud issue here. And I had some anomaly detections running. I kind of already knew about it. And it was actually because of a price increase that they did, right? And so the actual issue was customer friction in that refund or just cancellation process, and even the communication of the price increase. So without understanding the nuances of chargebacks, we probably would have done a different solution, right? But we could actually address it because we understood it. We're able to work with the business teams and really improve that customer satisfaction angle of it. So in the end, right, like that's the biggest misconception is all chargebacks are just fraud when there's a wealth of information that you can gain from it.
Great points, Dave. The complexity of chargebacks, and if you understand the different levels and types, then you can really analyze your chargebacks and learn and improve your systems. Great points. Barbara, what about you? Are you seeing a specific misconceptions that happen in the industry?
Well, yes. I think the biggest misconception I found is that, which is also the hardest to explain internally in a company, is the idea that if you are right, you will win the chargeback. Okay, that's simply not true. First of all, you have to know the rules. And this is the first step to win a chargeback. Second, you have to think about that on the other side, there are people that are tired. It's 6 p.m. They are bored, and they have to look in 3 minutes, more or less, to the rebuttal documentation you have sent. And even if for you is everything crystal clear, you know what you do, you know your processes, you can explain them, but you have to be able to explain to someone else all of these things. And for example, when it comes to saying who you are, unless you're not Amazon, okay, maybe the person on the other side doesn't know what you are doing and what you are selling. So even if you are technically correct, winning a chargeback is not guaranteed.
Great points. Great points. I always say that it's not just about knowing your data, knowing what to do with your data, explaining it to a human on the other side that only has a few minutes to review that. Brian, what about you? Are you seeing any specific misconceptions around chargebacks?
A little bit of everything from there, like what everyone said. So I'll double click on something that Dave said because it kind of brought me back to one specific moment of we have lagging indicators and leading indicators. So lagging kind of being the chargebacks. Leading indicators were different for me on every stop. One company was global, so I'll talk about a global experience. When I was working domestic only, this leading indicator wouldn't have worked there. So now we had a plan on localization. So there's also some ways that we could have better handled the rollout. Yes, I understand that. So we weren't necessarily translated appropriately in all of the countries that we were in. We were also not priced appropriately in all the regions that we operated in. And there was conversion factors. So one leading indicator for us was when we were a US domestic company, so we were working within USD. When a local currency, non-USD, was devalued compared to the USD in that region, or whoever used that currency, we would then see over the next X amount of time, depending on the decline versus recovery of the conversion between the currencies, we would see a pretty significant spike in chargeback. So that's another one that's really hard to have that conversation internally to say, insert the currency is dropping very quickly compared to the USD. At first, people are like, why do we care about that? Like, that's not a part of our business. We charge in USD. Like, we should be good. And it just shows sometimes the naiveness of the working boundaries and constraints that you're operating in. But those are important factors to understand. And that's what makes a lot of these conversations really, really hard. Because at first, you're going to get hit with kind of glossed over eyes, raised eyebrows, confused, kind of like the processing of like, why should I care? And that's the gap a lot of times when we have these conversations is you're leaving that big gaps for who you're talking to of they don't really understand why they care. They don't even understand why they're having this conversation with you. Me kind of starting earlier within companies, like they knew who I was, but I was still leveled down from the executive team, kind of talking through macro economics and the impact to our company. So that's a specific incident. So the way that I think about that is like, what leading indicators can you track even just for yourself to help have harder conversations internally to help set up how can you mitigate this risk downstream. For us, leading indicator, currency devaluation, how we figured out how to mitigate that risk wasn't really with our chargebacks or fraud prevention. It was about better translation. It was about localizing our entities and having accurate pricing for the regions and their price willingness of how they like to shop. So payment opportunities, a lot of it kind of honestly came from the customer experience and payment optimization, but had a huge impact on our chargebacks.
Amazing, great points, Brian. Myself, I worked in the crypto space for quite a long time. Had the same exact issue. The arbitrage would definitely cause issues, and it's something that also what I really connect with all of what you said is a lot of times as you are the domain expert at the company you're in, how you need to educate the other teams that wait a minute, maybe you're not looking at this problem in the right way. So it's a challenge to actually sell your point internally so that the rest of the teams can work in a better way. If I look at, let's say, the anti-fraud space, and what's great is some of you have worked in the anti-fraud space or are still working in that space as well. Now, I saw the anti-fraud space really develop quite quickly in the industry when technology was there, machine learning, using different models to advance your rules and make better decisioning. And I felt like chargebacks was kind of staggering behind. Brian, do you have any opinion on why that was? Why was fraud and anti-fraud tools advancing so quickly where chargebacks was staying behind?
I think Dave kind of hit it already, but it also creates the biases on where the money flows, investors and where they're willing to invest in and build the products. If you think that if you put in a fraud prevention tool, it should stop all chargebacks because all chargebacks are bad, they're fraudulent. So you invest heavily in that, you get a big team, you don't have any domain experts. Usually it's kind of just like the product team, authorization team, engineering, not my core expertise. We need to collect payments to keep the lights on. We'll just put something up, get it up and running, perfect, and then we're good. What do you mean chargebacks are still helping? So I have some assumptions of like when you follow the money started to flow within payments, and then the money started to flow within fraud prevention with the same biases of the misconception Dave already talked about of, well, these fraud prevention tools should just stop all chargebacks. And then once that changes behaviors a little bit, it does stop a lot of chargebacks, but then customer behaviors start to look elsewhere. Well, okay, what if I do a free trial? Oh, I billed through by accident. Oh, I forgot I had this other account. Now there's some of these gray areas, changes of policies where people try to take advantage of, and then chargebacks now are still increasing despite having lots of money within the fraud prevention space. So I think that's one piece. If you do follow the money again, the last 2-3 years, there's been a lot more money in the chargeback space, and they're starting to get a little bit more niche in like how to think about solving the problem. So it's not necessarily like one tool will do everything, and there's different components where they can kind of layer and work together. And then just following along with Justt growth over the last, even before that, has been pretty incredible. But when I started years ago, it was like 1-2 chargeback companies, and they were more outsourcing versus automation. So seeing that from more outsourcing to automation to niche where we are today, and then I won't even say 3-5 years for AI, what AI can ultimately do probably in this next 6 to 9 months.
Definitely. Barbara, from your end, do you feel like you saw a reason why chargebacks and the technology behind chargebacks was more of a slow mover than the anti-fraud space?
Well, listen to Brian. I had a similar idea. I mean, if I look at the chargebacks that we were managing pre-COVID, they were most of them, they were fraudulent chargebacks. Okay, so at the end, investing and developing fraud prevention tools meant stopping chargebacks. Okay, for the travel industry after COVID, it changed a lot. Now, most of our chargebacks are service chargebacks. We are talking about 60% of our chargebacks are related to services. This means that at the end, confirming that the customer behind the transaction is legit, it's not longer enough to prevent chargebacks. So when it was enough to prevent chargebacks, so the technology concentrates in development of fraud prevention, but now the focus should change.
Great points. Dave, anything to add from those 2 points?
Yeah, I know. I think Brian and Barbara really hit on it, and Brian especially with talking about the nuances of it and everything, right? Like when it comes to that pre-transaction space, there's that immediacy and visibility of it, right? And that actually plays itself as a perfect playground for AI and machine learning and that instant feedback loop. And then too, as Brian touched, right? Like the chargeback space, it's like, hey, instead of being at the front door, you're investigating a crime that happened weeks or months later, right? And so that feedback loop on the issue itself, and then when you try to put in solutions, is also going to be a lagging indicator there too. So you have this thing that you can instantly have gratification on of saying, hey, I did this tool and look at the benefit of it. Whereas chargebacks is a little more tedious, right? That it's a longer term game. And these solutions you put in place, you have to wait a bit to be able to tell that great story you might have done. But as they also touch, I think there is light at the end of the tunnel, right? There's been a lot of advancement in this space, and a lot of people like Justt and so forth are putting great investments where that long-term investments they can show the benefit of it, right? And then also companies like Visa and MasterCard stepping up with their deflection things. So it's an exciting time, I'd say.
Yeah, great points, everyone. And Dave, I really loved what you mentioned about it. It fit like a glove in some way. When machine learning started, data-driven decisioning, it just okay. You're going to decide if this is true fraud, if this is a good transaction or a fraudulent transaction. Made sense in the anti-fraud space. When you look at persuasive documentation and building documentation for individual on an issuer side to review in your favor, it didn't fit in that space in the beginning. And I remember when I first started digging in that area, some people looked at me like I was crazy because it was so early on in the actual industry. And today it's like everybody's like, oh yeah, of course, technology, chargebacks, of course that goes together. So it's really interesting how it's developed. Barbara, specifically as an OTA and in the travel and hospitality space, are there unique challenges that you guys have seen in that space around chargebacks, and have those challenges changed over time?
Yes, for sure. And how many times do I have to answer this? Okay. I think in travel industry, there are some challenges that are similar to other industries, but many of them are quite unique. First of all, we do not sell physical goods. So when it comes to demonstrate that you have delivered a service, your documentation is totally different from a merchant who is selling tangible products. The second big challenge is the lead time. In travel industry is unusually long. I mean, this year my husband turned 50. Okay, he always wanted to travel to Thailand. In May, I bought the tickets. Departure date, February 26. So the risk of a chargeback on that transaction is longer than a year at the end. And just think about how much imagination do you need to when it comes to make an accrual of that cost in your P&L. So it's quite difficult with a so long window of risk. And third, us as an OTA, an online travel agency, we deal with a lot of providers and different actors in the travel space. This means that you are linked to the provider refund policies and reliability. If someone here works in the travel industry, can understand if I say that, for example, if you are selling tickets of an airline, we can say Monarch, for example, and the airline goes bankrupt, for you, it's quite a busy period, we can say. Okay, so these are, I think, the most challenging topics in the travel industry. If it has changed the time, yes, COVID has been a turning point. Okay, when you pass from having a lot of transaction and few chargebacks only for fraud to zero transaction and thousands of chargebacks to be managed, for sure your perception has to change. And what I've seen in addition is that in the travel industry after COVID, the awareness of the customer is totally different. So if they want a refund, they have been used during COVID to open chargebacks. So now we are still seeing customers that are not entitled to have a refund that open chargebacks.
Great point. That's exactly what Katie and MasterCard said in the last panel is the the travel industry is just a big one, and it's since COVID, it's just been increasing, and it's exactly what you said, that it's become the way of dealing with your dispute. But I also really like that point. If the chargeback can come so much later because the travel event can be months later, and then even once the dispute comes in, then you have the whole life cycle of the chargeback as well to deal with. So it can get quite long and a lengthy process. Dave, you know, at Microsoft, you guys have multiple business lines: subscription, physical goods, digital goods. I mean, what is it like, all the challenges you guys are dealing around chargebacks with so many different business lines, and how have those challenges developed in your career?
Yeah, no, I guess I have the fortune to look over all those business lines from, Xbox and M365 Office to more of our commercial products on Azure and Microsoft Ads. And so it goes kind of back to my earlier point that understanding the nuance is paramount, right? When it's more of a subscription service, what can you really do, right? From a chargeback management standpoint of collecting the user data, but then also understanding what's causing the chargebacks. And it's really, when things like click to cancel are happening, it becomes paramount to ensure that you're providing the understanding of the bills, the ability to cancel easier, things of that sort, right? Where then when you think about services like Azure, which is a growing bill, right, over time, it's postpaid, it's bringing in that enhancement of understanding what the bill is, right, and getting more granularity on it, right, and it all goes back, right. So even though there's nuances and differences in it, the framework is still really the same, right. One, you need to understand the space, and you need to bring in your stakeholders to it to let them know of the chargeback issues, because, right, like when you work in a big company or even small one, no good solution is done by yourself, right. It takes a team to understand and really come up with great solutions. Two, it's really about focusing on the customer experience, right? Like, I think you've heard me say this, but like when I look at chargebacks, first and foremost, look inward and what are the customers experiencing? Because in the end of the day, the vast majority of your customers are great, and it's that small percentage that you're dealing with. So really make sure you're addressing that. And then third, it's ensuring, like, when you talk about these issues, when it comes to the different business lines, right? It's really communicating the cost benefit to it, but again, the customer satisfaction or dissatisfaction that's coming from these chargebacks. There's tons of statistics showing, if a customer does a chargeback with you, the likelihood they're not going to do business with you again, right? And so as a business, as all of us are, right, first and foremost, you need to protect that ecosystem. That's principle for any solution that you do.
Great points, David. And I really like that point you mentioned about the collaboration between the teams, and you're not doing it on your own. We see it with a lot of our enterprise companies at larger companies, it's harder to actually build that collaboration with the team between those teams. And if you have the right culture and the right processes between the teams where you can build that collaboration and learn from one another, it's key to decreasing chargebacks in the first place and dealing with the chargebacks when they come in, and learning from your chargebacks. Brian, someone who's been in the fraud space and chargeback space for so long, what do you think the perceptions were when you joined, and how is that shift? Did you see a shift in the perception around chargebacks?
Absolutely. I think the old adage of it's just the cost of doing business, we'll write it off, we'll put it in bad debt. There's a lot of ways for accounting and finance teams to just say, not worth our issues, not worth our hourly, no one knows how to do this. It's easier to just write it off. And we'll just carry a little allocation on a month-to-month, and we're good as long as we're within that bad debt line item. So we've come a long way. And I'll split it up into two market sizes. We have the mature teams and we have the immature teams. I see both of them as a perception-wise, both progressing with their understanding. Before, you have the immature that just honestly don't know a chargeback because that might not even know where to get their reports or alerts. They don't even know how long do I have to fight them. Oh, it expired. Oh, well. And then you have the teams that had maybe a little bit of structure, some compelling evidence, or maybe copy and paste and say, hey, we're fighting it, we're winning some, we don't know what averages are, we don't know what benchmarks are, but you know what? We're recovering something. Now today, I'm seeing the more earlier, I'll say immature as like, they're still developing, let's say the developing teams within the chargeback space, they are trying. They might just put in a tool, but it's set it and forget it. But at least something's in place and they're doing something. Or they're kind of trying to figure out, how do I win, but I'll do it here and there. I didn't get to it, I didn't win this. So the inconsistency is there. Then you have the more developed programs who understand that payment fraud won't just lead to chargebacks. They understand fake accounts can lead to it. They understand free trials can lead to it. They understand returns can lead to it. They understand internationalization can lead to it. They understand price changes can lead to it. So they are starting to understand the impact of business decisions and the product as a whole, and the different risks along the entire customer journey can ultimately still lead to chargeback. So then being able to track it to different parts of the product or businesses, so then each one of those offers a different potential solution. So it's not necessarily one solution will solve everything. First party fraud, you're going to solve a little bit different than true fraud. You're going to start chargebacks from return fraud because customer support didn't respond in time, a little bit differently than all of that. So the more developed teams starting to see get a little bit more specific on each part of the product that can ultimately lead to chargebacks and understanding that.
Amazing points, and I love that concept of from the cost of doing business to actual systematic thinking about this process, strategic thinking about it. Really good points. Now let's change the topic a little bit and focus more on the operational challenges. Dave, I know it's really interesting at where you sit at Microsoft. You're dealing with trying to prevent chargebacks and dealing with the chargebacks when they come in. How do you split that up? Do you focus more on the scale of fighting the chargebacks, or focus more on reducing true fraud, friendly fraud? How do you balance that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? Like on chargeback management, right, in itself, it requires constant learning and adaptation to the templates and things of that sort. And then there's the operational challenges of the prevention, but I really see it as a flywheel, right? And sometimes, right, like these operational challenges in customer experience, they're not siloed, right? They go hand in hand. For instance, I remember one time we had a spike in chargebacks on one of our business lines. When we went to investigate it, it's really difficult to figure it out. And finally, we were looking at the customer feedback, and it turned out we had an issue with our statement description, right? And so when we addressed that, we then improved the customer satisfaction angle, which then reduced the burden on chargebacks. And so really, like when I look at it from that holistic flywheel, you know, you can, if you are able to improve the deflection and even prevention of chargebacks, then it reduces the burden on the chargeback management piece. But you can't keep your eye on only one, right? Just because of the, you know, the evolution that's occurring in each of the spaces. So yeah.
Great points. And Barbara, fees and regulations are changing. Do those changes in any way does that change the way you're looking at chargebacks and how you're dealing with chargebacks with all these changes happening in the industry now?
Well, I think this year the two major changes that are coming are Visa VAM program and the update of Visa fees in the US and Canada. So what has to change in looking at chargeback when this kind of fee changes come in is that you need to know exactly your data. Okay, so the key to manage chargeback effectively is to have a deep, detailed understanding of your data. I work mostly within the European market, so VAMP for us is the priority. What we have done as soon as Visa announced this change is to look at our data. Do we have all of them? Do we have TC40? Do we have chargeback history? Everything? Okay. What are our levels? Okay. Found out the levels. I went to each of our acquirers and asked them, do you see the same thing? Do you think we are aligned? Are these the threshold, etc.? So in fee changes, I think that knowing your data is fundamental. And on the other side, looking at the visa changes, so in the fees in the US and Canada, Visa and also MasterCard, they are clearly moving towards reducing the dispute timelines. Okay, this means that in order to be effective, you have to start to scale. You have to start to have faster processes. You have to start managing chargebacks in a different way, because the more slow you are and the more fees you pay.
Definitely, good points. If we look at technology today and how it's advancing, what's possible today maybe wasn't possible in the past. What do you think about that, Brian? Do you think we've gotten to a point where we're doing things in a different way today?
Absolutely. I mean, from my window, I'll talk like right at the pivot moment of where I noticed things started to change. I was working at a digital subscription. We had an $8.99 subscription. So with fees, we had to win an unrealistic amount of like 85% to make the math working, putting any manual labor on it. So as a business, we just accepted all chargebacks automatically. If we could refund them, we would refund them and just say, we just can't handle the scale that we have at the price point that we are in the hourly wages. There's just no way. It was unrealistic. At that point, I was looking at the number we were writing off. I'm like, if I can figure out a little bit something here, I might be able to negotiate at least one extra headcount, because again, I was very, very small and using shared resources. So I'm like, I need a dedicated person to help me, help my sanity, and help us actually push this function forward. So at that point, I started doing some research. There were two major players at that one point. One ended up getting acquired by a fraud prevention company. They're, again, more outsourced. Then there was another one, pretty big. They have a bit of a reputation for themselves. And again, outsourced and very expensive. Both of those still didn't really work for us on the math problem for what they realistically would have to win. Now, it wasn't 85%, but we're still talking 60, 65% guaranteed to kind of break even. Still kind of unrealistic, and no company really wants to sign up for that, of like, that's our bare minimum threshold. At that point, there was one company that just came out from kind of like stealth, and they were an automation tool. One of the first automation tools out there is before Mitigator, who was acquired by Count, Equifax, they were just doing verify and escalate alerts. They weren't doing their chargeback automation tools. So there really wasn't anything out there. So we took a risk on them because there was newer technology at that time, and there really wasn't any competition, but that was the only way for us to have the math work. And we were accepting everything anyway. Their pricing was, you don't pay us unless we win something. So for us, it's like, let's take the risk and see how it works out. So Obviously, that's been a business model that has continued to grow. But now where we are today, I love the machine learning. I love the ability for the feedback loops and actually having deeper reporting. What I had was just simple automation, simple compelling evidence, but at that point, it worked. The progression since then, 6, 7 years, that was probably about 6 years now at that point, has been tremendous. And that was right before COVID. So even post-COVID, it's multiplied at that. So I'm excited.
Amazing. And Dave, what about from your end? What have you seen in what is possible today, especially what Microsoft is doing that wasn't possible before, whether internally or externally, what you guys are doing?
Yeah, no, really technology I feel is evolving at exponential pace, right? I remember 10 years ago building dashboards, putting stuff together, but it was rudimentary and took a lot of time. And just a couple of months ago, I was even able to deploy my own AI agents on anomaly detection and things of that sort, which is crazy, right? To bring it to like the chargeback space, at the size that Microsoft does business, right? You can think even a very small amount of a chargeback rate means hundreds of thousands of cases, right? And at Microsoft, we are very fortunate to be at the forefront with tools like Copilot and ChatGPT. And so when you look at those hundreds of thousands of cases, well, when you lose, the bank actually gives you reasons back of why you lost, right? But if you tried to have a human go sift through all that and drive, understanding of the cases and everything, that'd take literal years to do. Well, with the power of GPT, right, we could actually ingest those hundreds of thousands of things, derive, what the feedback was, and really iterate and put that feedback into action to improve our templates. And that just was not possible just even a couple of years ago, right? And I think what the cool example of this is, it's not like it's taking away human jobs or opportunities, right? It's really empowering and enhancing our ability to do our jobs better with it.
Yeah, great points. And what I really liked is you hit on not only just improving building your evidence, but learning from why are you losing. And what's really cool is before you could try to analyze structured data to figure out one loss and what areas are you weaker at. But now you can analyze unstructured data, the actual issuer response of why they rejected your evidence, and get insights back from that of maybe there's something you can improve in your evidence. You have a trend of you keep getting a similar issuer response, and doing that with volumes and with a human team is just not scalable. Yeah. Barbara, another point we always talk about is in order to build a good chargeback solution, you have to have the data. What is the biggest challenge for you though in regards to data and getting that data together?
Well, I think I already said data is fundamental, okay, in chargeback management for cost control, for compliance, and for analysis. You can enhance your fraud prevention system. You can communicate better your terms and conditions, analyzing chargebacks. I think there are two big challenges in dealing with chargeback data. The first one is the accessibility. Not all acquirers share the data in a consistent or transparent way. So for some of them, you have to ask for data and they provide one via SFTP, the other via API, the other via email, and the other via mailbox. Maybe. Second one is the normalization of all the data. We are multi-acquirer. It means that when we receive data from one acquirer, we receive them in a totally different way from the other one. So different levels, different terminology, different formats. So you have to normalize all this data. Otherwise, you won't have a full and complete picture of what is happening to your chargebacks. So I think these are the most challenging points in data in chargebacks.
Great points. And Brian, what's interesting what Dave said is, it's not that they're not going to be jobs in this space anymore, but it's going to make people better at their jobs. So it's definitely going to decrease human involvement in certain areas of the process. But then A, do you agree with what Dave's saying? And B, where will humans be necessary in this process with all of these technological changes?
I think it's going to be similar to a situation we're in today. Fraud and risk teams have a hard time getting budget to hire people. With the ability of this tooling and functionality that will continue to develop at a light speed over the next 3, 6, 9 months, I don't even want to think about 10 years from now what it could be like. This will give the ability for teams who feel that they're in a backlog, who always feel underwater, the ability to have higher output per individual. Now it's the chance to like develop on those skills, be more specialized, so you can find the areas where to complement the human intelligence with the artificial intelligence. As you can kind of see, I'm starting to stack it. Then I more see like there's going to be some type of concept of program management, but you're going to be managing the coordination between AI agents and human agents. So I see a lot of specialization. I see a lot of similar struggles for still hiring, but this gives an opportunity to offset some of that, to invest in your team for better specialization and higher output per individual. And it's a lot easier of an argument internally for higher output per current individual versus bringing on an additional headcount. So maybe that might change. I don't know, but that's my gut feeling is there's going to be definitely a big aptitude into what people can do in their current situation and have higher output. And then higher output means higher revenue per employee. So that helps you be a little bit more valuable to the top line and bottom line.
Amazing. Thank you, Brian. So let's go back to the initial question. Do you think that the chargebacks are still being pushed under the rug, or still the black sheep of the world of payments? Has it changed? And where is it going? Dave, would you like to start?
Yeah, no, I really genuinely believe that chargebacks are no longer that outlier, right? Like there was rapid development in that pre-transaction space, and so the ROI is right in the chargeback space now. And it's really paramount to take, to utilize that opportunity to explain and educate people on the cost savings that chargebacks can provide if you do it right, but also on that customer satisfaction benefit as well. Right. Personally, I've seen that shift happen at Microsoft, where initially when I joined, it was difficult to get, traction and priority on work streams. But now that I've worked with them, they understand this cost measure. Now they're inviting me in for special sessions to talk about the trends of chargebacks and what they can do, which is powerful in itself, right? Because now it's a more holistic view and they can put in their input, because maybe I know the what, but they really know the why, right? And so it's great to take it from that outlier to now at the forefront because of all the goodness it can provide.
Amazing. Barbara, what do you think?
Well, I would say more a gray sheep. For sure, there's definitely more focus on them. The technology has moved forward and everything we said today. But if I think to some acquirers I recently met, not longer than last year, that they're still managing chargebacks via email, I think there's still a long way to go. So it's no more a black sheep, but for sure a gray sheep, yes.
Great point. And Brian?
The boulder's rolling. I still think we're going uphill for a little bit. Progress is being made. More people are trying to understand. I think with a lot of the news of Visa and Vamp has caught a lot of non-payments professionals' eyes of, should we care about this? And that's a good starting point. And the important piece is understand who you're talking to, who needs to know, what is their current understanding of it. As a fraud and payments professional, it's overwhelming to us. As a non-payments and fraud professional, it's even more overwhelming. Understand where the individual you're talking to or the individual you need to talk to, where their current level could be, and help bring them along with us. It's a good opportunity to show your expertise, and simplifying complex ideas builds a lot of trust internally. So a lot of work to do, but there's opportunity here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Great insights, everyone. JC, do we have time for any questions, or are we out of time?
I think if you want to field one question, I would say we do have time. We can try to make it brief if possible, but go for it. Yeah, I do see some
Great.
questions in the Q&A.
There's actually it's an interesting question. The first one I would direct it towards you, Barbara, is is there's a little bit of a confusion here, is how can you do a chargeback so long after the transaction was made? Do you really need to consider that? And it's a great question because the travel industry is so unique. I'd love for you to explain that.
Yes, it's simply if we are talking about fraud chargebacks, we start counting from the transaction date. If we are talking about service chargeback, we start counting from the service date. This means if I will start my journey in a year, I've got time after the service date to open a service chargeback. So yes, we need to consider that risk for sure.
Great clarification. Great. On that note, thank you, Dave, Brian, and Barbara. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed working with the three of you. And thank you for everyone who joined today. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll continue this conversation.
Thank you all.
Awesome. Yeah, like Roenen said, great job, everyone. This was an awesome session. Lively discussion, really awesome to like hear everyone's perspective. So again, thank you, as Roenen said, for sharing your insights with us. Those of you who are in the audience, we hope you'll join us in the next session, which is titled Automation, Optimization, and Setting Up for Success. Super exciting session that we have planned. I think Roenen will be in that session, as well as Orly from our team at Justt. And that one is going to start at the top of the hour. So there's some time to stretch out and get ready for the next one. I'll leave some information on the screen here for those of you who are still hanging around. But in order to access this session, you will have to head back out to the lobby and then just join into the next session when it starts. But yeah, Roenen, Dave, Brian, Barbara, great job. Thank you so much. Super happy to have you as part of Chargeback X.
Thank you.